Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. Again, another one. September 18th, this time, 2023. Time for another week of shows and plenty going on, of course. Let's see. Oh, yeah, today will be an exciting show as we add new production staff to the staff. Okay, so there you go. To the I don't know what. Anyway, it's not happening. We're not actually adding anybody. It is roofing day. Somehow it has ended up being roofing day. We sprung a leak last week during some heavy rainstorms, and we had to have it fixed. And the first time that we could actually get somebody to come in and do it before the snow season and the rainy season coming up was today. And guess what they picked for their 2-hour window of arrival to start their work? It's 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern time. So that's our time together. Now, if I'm here and you're here and the roofers are here, then it's all of our time. We'll all have pizza on the roof or something like that. I don't know what. Anyway, it's not a big deal, and they're not tearing the whole thing off, but who knows what could be going on. Any number of things could happen, from ringing the doorbell and having to go say, I gotta go, and answer the door. But we have our home-based hybrid work staff production folks here today. You know who they are. They're eating breakfast in the background. That's our Midwest diner ambiance that I like to have in the show. And by the way, longtime listeners to the show, we've mentioned this before, but perhaps you forgot. There were some of you who used to listen and look forward to the 9:30 opening of the Coke can. And that has long since passed. But anyway, I do still get letters and notes of appreciation for hearing the clanking of silverware in the background. It's actually quite nice. And home, it makes everybody feel at home. But today we may have the doorbell ringing and the roofers tromping through, although most of the work really needs to be done on the roof outside. But, attic access is going to have to happen. Ladders are going to have to be placed. Who knows what sort of shouting and yelling, but then a couple of additional shingles being pounded in. And thankfully, I think, we're not tearing up the foundation of the roof here and tearing up plywood or anything. But you never know. And all during our exciting program here. So we may, maybe they'll stop by and offer us their take on the weekend activities from the former guy. He was all over the news because he's all over everything. He gets all over everything and he leaves a stain, and it's a real nuisance. He was on Meet the Press over the weekend, as it turns out, so they should it wasn't so much an issue of getting Chuck Todd out of there as they should have taken the whole program off the air. And our good friend, our Canuck pundit, Brian Monroe, knew as much even beforehand. It occurs to me, sitting here in my KITM hashtag input via Mastodon, is his comment from 3 days ago saying we should all boycott NBC and Meet the Press and Kristen Welker. There is no reason for her to be interviewing Trump. That is true, was true, has remained true over the weekend. She is useless and no better than the idiot Chuck Todd. F them both. Wow. So at least we know what Brian is thinking about the weekend results of the interview. And it was dumb. It was a terrible interview by most accounts. I've only seen snippets of it, including one exchange in which it was like, the guy's demented. He's out of his mind. He's got no clue what's going on. But he gave even more evidence of that over the weekend alone. But the exchange I'm thinking about is Kristen Welker is questioning him about, why do you think the elections were rigged, kind of thing. And says, you went to court 60 times on this question and you lost every single time. And I thought it was interesting that in the middle, Trump interjects. He objects. No, I didn't. No, I didn't go to court. I didn't go 60 times. But it's kind of a true fact that he did. And it was interesting to hear that he had, denied that right to her face in the middle of a nationally televised interview. But apparently no follow-up on that. No, you did. And when you say you didn't, everyone should know that sounds really crazy because the whole world knows that you did. Anyway, let's see. Oh, by the way, Mighty OCD says that I shouldn't shout at the workers. He was worried that all the shouting would be me, and it might be. It depends. It's possible. But in all likelihood, the shouting would just be, well, maybe they're on strike. I don't know. That could be. I don't think there's a roofing strike happening. I hope I don't have to cross that picket line because I need this roof repaired. But they will probably be shouting, "We're done. We've done a fantastic job, and we're happy to help." You know, something like that. Probably. Maybe a little salty language in there in the middle. Anyway. So yeah, there was that. There was an appearance at a I don't know what this was. It says it's listed in the newspaper reports that I've seen as a summit of some kind in the Washington D.C. area, and I never heard of it. And I saw the title of it, and it's not Eat, Pray, Love, but it's something quite close to that. It has pray in the title, and there are 3 words in it. And it's not them stealing from the movie Eat, Pray, Love, but it's pray something else, something else, something else. And Trump took the opportunity to give his new favorite stump speech, which is, Biden is so mentally incompetent. I would love to take a mental acuity test, and we'll compare our results. He's too old. He can't deal with Russia and the nuclear. Oh no, he does say nuclear, doesn't he? And the nuclear. But he then goes on to point out, and besides, I'm going to win. I'm way ahead of Obama in the 2024 election. And you'll find that if I don't win, Biden will very soon be taking us to war. We'll be involved in World War II very shortly, which, of course, as you know, has already taken place. So, well, the mental acuity testing didn't go that well. The appearance on Meet the Press, I mean, he's still alive, and people say they're going to put him on their ballots in their states. So I guess there's no stopping it, but no shortage of entertaining things to say about what a big dumb jerk Donald Trump is. And in that sense, it's like time isn't even passing. It's like we're not even aging. This is better than hyaluronic acid, or however you say that, mifepristone acid. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here. How about that? He actually took some time to note what was going on in the news, not only with this, but beyond this, and has facts to back it up. So good morning, Greg. Why don't we switch to you?
Good morning. How are you?
Okay.
So we all know World War II is like between Saudi Arabia and China.
Right.
And clearly, Biden's going to get us back into it. And that'll just leave Trump as president of China. I mean, it's inevitable. You can't stop it.
Oh, I forgot. There was also a bold anti-Semitic pronouncement during the High Holy Days as well. I forgot.
Yes, which was pretty foul. Usually what happens is people take a screenshot and put it up on the app formerly known as Twitter. And I just saw a lot of people saying, I'm not even doing this. This is disgusting.
Yeah, that was a pretty bad one. Also, he's got another young Nazi friend of his who's in the news, like the new dapper Nazi. And the newspaper guys are all falling for it again. Look at his haircut. He's so dapper. Let's talk about what motivates this Nazi.
I didn't even see that one.
Hopefully
that'll last 24 hours.
Yeah,
this one was more along the lines of everybody knows Jews have dual loyalty.
Right.
And I can't believe they're supporting Israel over me.
Yes, or that they're not actually supporting Israel, because I think part of his statement
was,
given
that the High Holy Days
liberal Jews
have started, this is really the important time to bring it up. So I'm just letting you know how I really feel about Jews.
Okay, it was nice of him to do. Maybe he'll remember his daughter or son-in-law, or maybe he'll put his son-in-law on the spot and get him prosecuted. That's an okay outcome. Not for what he thinks.
So let's talk a little bit
about
Meet the Press. Not a lot.
All right.
But a little bit.
Why not? Everyone else is. Let's do it.
Well,
we're better
of things here. First of all, Jay Rosen, who is a media academic and a media critic, had a nice thread about it, which I think is worth it. It's short, so I think it's worth noting.
Okay. This is not a thread. A threat. It's a thread.
A thread.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe even less than a thread.
Oh. Threadlets.
He said, look, I said I would try to have an open mind as I watch Meet the Press. And by the way, I watch it because it's my job.
Yeah.
Not because I want to. You don't have to.
Yeah.
But I watched it
usually the
to see
offer.
how NBC handled the interview with Trump and the debut of a new host after viewing the show, reading NBC's fact check. Because what happened is they pre-taped it.
Yeah.
And then the response
that's
to
how
Trump's Gish
Brian
Gallop
knew.
lies was to publish something on a website for fact checking, as if anybody is going to actually look at the website.
Yeah, I'll go there. Let's look.
And monitoring the program's Twitter feed, I'm left with these impressions.
Oh.
NBC chose zero
impressions
innovations
3.
model for how to conduct and present a Trump interview at this stage in his degradation. Everything was predictable. Nothing was surprising. And new host Kristen Welker did nothing to justify going to the well again and again and again with another Trump Q&A. On the show, Welker raised the criticism she knew NBC would get for doing this and asked Peter Baker to respond. At a panel, and Peter Baker was on the panel. Peter Baker, Mr. Republican, was asked, what do you think of this both sides issue?
Oh, I think it has two sides.
And yeah, he said, it's unthinkable journalists stop asking questions of a major party candidate, even though it's true that Trump lies and constructs his own reality. Baker said, this is a hard problem, but what can we do? Which is what I meant, Jay Rosen said, by zero innovations model, in which you simply ignore the fact that interviewing Trump does not work. No accountability moment ever comes. Right? And Luke Zaleski points out that's true. Trump doesn't do interviews. He tells long fake stories to provide an alternative reality. And Rosen says, well, Trump enjoys being the unreliable narrator of his own deeds and intentions. So if Welker gets him to say, yeah, I'll testify to that as she did, the informational gain is zero, even though she, quote, did her job by pinning him down. The transcript is full of victories like that. The problems are old news and well known to anybody who pays attention. You know, what I learned by bringing an open mind to meet the press was nothing.
Yeah, well, I guess that was a good prediction. Most people predicted we would learn nothing. I would like to, I mean, clearly he's waiting for them to innovate. And I wonder whether the innovation is, why don't I get to be, and you wouldn't even be the first now that I think about it, but why don't you just interview him in such a way that you get the tape of him unpinning the microphone, throwing it down, and storming off. That's good video.
Yeah, we don't want the actual interview. We want the 10 minutes before and the 10 minutes after.
Yeah, like
that's news.
I guess so. Or you could have pressed any of the issues, right? I didn't go 60 times, but you did, and everybody knows that's the case.
Tim Russert, Mehdi Hassan style is to say, okay, here's the tape. Okay, here's the tape. Okay, here's the tape, because you have that ready.
Yeah, there's that, certainly.
That's one way to do it. But
yeah. Or just say,
Jonathan
you're
Swan
lying.
did that too, and he didn't even have tapes.
Right.
So Jay Rosen says that we'll ever know because it's the same company, but I'd love to hear what Rachel Maddow thought. She's the one who said, on air, there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things.
Oh.
And NBC willingly paid that cost. And they did, because basically they think it's good for ratings and they really don't care about anything else.
I guess not.
My point of view, which I've said extensively and am only led to believe even more and more every day, is that the disaster that happened to democracy came the day Roone Arledge merged news and sports into an infotainment division.
Yeah, okay, I see.
And we've been following it as wrestling ever since.
I guess so.
It's all kayfabe.
You certainly have said that enough, and it stands the test of time.
Well, unfortunately, we saw it on Meet the Press. So, the weird thing isn't that Meet the Press went the way that it did. That's not weird.
No.
The weird thing is NBC and Kristen Welker and folks like that think she did a good job. That's what's weird. It was terrible.
Sigh. Yeah, I mean, I guess they figure, well, we were tough. We asked the questions. He said the answers. We said no. And then he said yes. And he said, that's all the time we have.
Yeah. Well, because, Jack Smith might have liked it because we got him to say on tape that, a bunch of lawyers told me I lost, but I didn't like what they said, so I fired them. I don't respect them anymore. I only respect lawyers who tell me what I want to hear.
Yeah,
I mean, that may have been useful in court. Maybe that's the one good thing. No.
Yeah.
'Tis an ill wind that blows nobody any good. Maybe that's the one good thing that came out of it.
Right.
Doesn't
so
justify
after all.
him being on the air unchallenged and bloviating.
No. But maybe we could take that away with us. And it did distract us from Lauren Boebert news briefly.
Yeah, which I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on.
Okay. Sure.
My question
Gotta
was,
hand
of course,
it to you
as
there.
people probably know now,
Yeah.
Boebert was first
You don't
accused
have
of vaping in
Yeah.
a theater.
Right. We don't
She
allow
denied it.
that.
Turned out it was on tape, but that was only the beginning. Then it turned out that she was groping the guy
don't allow that
next
either.
to her, which
She knew
fine,
him.
but she's Miss Family Values Party, so that's why it's a big deal, and it was all on tape, and
Right.
and so on and so
a family.
forth.
That's all. It's no big deal.
But the bigger question I think it raised is, why was it on tape?
Oh,
What
I
was
did
the
see a lot
movie
of people
theater doing,
thinking about
taping
that.
everybody and everything.
It was a live performance, but
Or live performance, right? But what was the theater doing?
I don't know.
And the best answer I got, I thought
you know
maybe
what?
it was
I have an
because
answer for you.
what happened in Colorado and Batman and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Is that not it?
But other people said, no, that's not why. It's
Why,
because
then?
of smartphones. They just want to make sure there's a live performance, and they want to make sure that you're not surreptitiously taping it.
Yeah, that's probably a good part of it. Sure. Yeah. Well, surveillance, security, surveillance, and yeah, you're not supposed to be taking pictures or filming. And she was doing that too. Everything she could do to violate the rules. She probably even brought in outside food.
Right. Now,
Outrageous.
again, a reminder, Lauren Boebert only won her district by 500 some odd votes.
That's right. And now we know
This
how
is
she
not
got some
Marjorie
of those
Taylor Greene's
votes.
district.
No.
So her campaign knows she's in trouble because they actually apologize, which Republicans never do. Certainly right-wing, fire-breathing Republicans never do.
Yeah, it's a new twist.
It's so unique it made news.
Yeah, that's
a
right.
man bites dog story. Lauren Boebert apologizes.
Yeah, that was, and she didn't bite anybody. I don't think it would have been on tape.
Right. So in any case, that MTP, that Meet the Press interview,
Emphasis on the
non-interview, whatever you want to call it, Gish Gallop,
Okay.
reminded me of a piece I put up on Saturday on the Pundit Roundup, which was by Margaret Sullivan, the ex-New York Times ombudsman, ex-Washington Post columnist, now teacher-professor, and has a column over at The Guardian in England. And this is, with democracy on the ballot, the mainstream press must change its ways. This was written before the Meet the Press thing, and of course she's right. It was written on Friday, and the tape was Sunday. U.S. news organizations have turned Biden's age into a scandal and continue to cover Trump as an entertaining sideshow.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Just under that is a blurb for a different article. Revealed U.S. economy strong under Biden, but Americans don't believe it.
Oh, well.
Christine Amanpour has reported all over the world, so she recognizes the democracy on the brink when she sees one. Last week, as she celebrated her 40 years at CNN, she issued a challenge to her fellow journalists. This is new. We know that she's made these remarks before, but last week she said it again. How she would cover U.S. politics as a foreign correspondent. We have to be truthful, not neutral, she urged. I would make sure you just don't give a platform to those who want to crash down the Constitution and democracy. That's exactly what Meet the Press did. That's why it was so wrong.
Oh, well.
Peter Baker, as usual, has no effing idea what he's talking about.
Well, in order to bring crashing down the U.S. Constitution, it has to be held up first. And so there you go, both sides.
Well, I think that NBC has heard the criticism that it's ridiculous to give this insurrectionist a platform, but I think we need a neutral view on this. So let's call in Steve Bannon. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, right. No, I think it was a great idea. So
it's an important call to action, Margaret Sullivan says. So far, the American press is failing to meet its responsibility, and here's some of what's going wrong. News organizations have turned Biden's age into the equivalent of a scandal in story after story, headline after headline. This is because they're bored and they have nothing else. They emphasize not his administration's accomplishments, but the fact that he's 80. A New York Times headline during the recent diplomatic mission to Asia, which, by the way, was a unique and incredible success, epitomized this, turning the president's joke about jet lag into impression of a doddering fool. It's evening, isn't it? An 80-year-old president's whirlwind trip. Ian Millhiser of Vox nailed the problem. I worry Biden's old coverage is starting to take on the same character as the 2016, but her emails coverage. Find something that's genuinely suboptimal about the Democratic candidate and dwell on it endlessly to balance coverage of the criminal in charge of the GOP. The evidence-free Biden impeachment efforts in the House of Representatives are also presented to news consumers without sufficient context. Most news outlets simply reported what Kevin McCarthy was doing as if it were completely legitimate.
Okay.
There were some exceptions. The New York Times was a welcome exception. McCarthy, facing an ouster and a shutdown, orders an impeachment inquiry.
There you go.
Which is correct.
Done.
And the Times actually did very well there. I outlined a couple of things that the Times did on this, which were quite good. Trump continues to be covered mostly as an entertaining sideshow. That's how he was done on Meet the Press. So how can the press do better? So the big problem is that the mainstream media wants to be seen as nonpartisan, which is a reasonable goal and bends over backwards to accomplish this. But if that means equalizing an anti-democratic candidate with a pro-democracy candidate, that's what they do. Add to this the obsession with the horse race aspect and the profit-driven desire to increase the potential news audience, and you've got the kind of problematic coverage discussed above. It's fearful, it's defensive, it's entertainment, and click focus. It's mired in the washed-up practices of an earlier era. The solution? Remember at all times what our core mission is. Communicate truthfully, keeping top of mind that we have a public service mission to inform the electorate. If that's our North Star, as it should be, every editorial judgment will reflect that. And at the moment, it does not.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, they must have a different goal in mind.
The Nobel-winning economist Paul Krugman pointed out last week that the media apparently has failed to communicate something should be a huge asset for Biden, the U.S. current Goldilocks economy. Low inflation, low unemployment, no hint of a recession, but many Americans, according to its surveys, are convinced the economy is terrible. 2/3 of Americans are unhappy about the economy despite reports inflation's easing and unemployment is close to a 50-year low. Many are unaware of or don't believe positive economic news. Media coverage surely is partly to blame. When gas prices spike, it's the end of the world. When they steady or fall, nobody covers it. Can the mainstream press rise to the challenge over the next year? Oh. She hopes, and I say no.
Okay. All right,
No,
so both
it's not gonna
sides.
happen.
She hopes yes, you say no.
Look
at that. Well, can always hope.
You
It's
say
not
why,
wise.
and I say I don't know.
Yes.
Oh, no. You say goodbye, and I say hello. So there was all of that. Now, if we're going to talk about stuff in the news, which is of interest, we also have to spend just a few minutes talking about the other impeachment.
Okay. Oh, yes. Right.
So Ken Paxton was impeached.
Right.
And then he was acquitted, resoundingly,
And that was
on all
wrong.
16 counts by his fellow Republicans in the Senate.
Same ones that impeached.
The House and
Well,
the Senate
House
don't get
is-
along. They're all Republicans in
Right.
Texas. The only game in town is Republican, but the House and Senate don't get along. So the question came up, well, why?
Yeah, why?
Because the House Republicans were willing to turn their back on an obvious crook.
Yes. It was an
And the
overwhelming
answer is
vote.
tons of money and threats from Trump and other GOP Republicans. You have to call them the establishment Republicans now because
Guess so.
Trump is the GOP. And this is from Axios. What we're hearing, it was made clear to Texas GOP senators they'd face a very well-funded primary opponent in the next election if they voted to impeach.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Okay. That's straightforward.
So GOP strategists treated this as if it were a nomination to the Supreme Court and a confirmation. We didn't care what the mainstream media said. The top GOP strategists said we basically ignored them from start to finish. And listen to these names because you've probably never heard of them.
Okay.
The goal was to fire up the grassroots, a story in National Pulse, Post-Millennial, and similar publications was way more valuable than any harm a New York Times story could possibly do.
Okay.
They have their own outlets, just like they have Fox News, just like they have Truth Social, just like they have other things, to get to people, to get to their base. They have these journals you've never heard of.
Yeah.
It's like Epoch Times.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I think I've
And
heard
so
the
it's information for you
post-millennial
and for your
ones.
listeners that there's this other ecosystem out there that we don't delve into because we'd have to take showers constantly.
Right.
But they're there. So, we send Ben Collins,
Oh,
and he generally tells us about
All
it. But
right,
in this
Ben.
particular case,
your problem, not mine.
this was Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon and the usual suspects lining up in outlets you've never heard of in order to get the grassroots to call their senators in Texas and say, you're screwed if you do this.
So same actors, just the new names are the media that they're using to get their word out.
Yeah, a new mighty Wurlitzer, if you're old enough to remember that term.
Yeah, all right. Oh, yeah, well, one or two of them are post-millennial, I believe, has crossed the screen once or twice. Don't know why, but all right. So they're active in this again. Yeah, the Ken Paxton thing was a pretty huge disappointment, although yeah, there was certainly a number of people saying, well, ultimately you're asking the question, will Republicans remove from office, convict another Republican? And probably not, but we were all led to believe it could have happened because the House side of the Texas state legislature, equally Republican, overwhelmingly voted to impeach him. And I guess the play was to say, see, we're not blind to corruption. We're just not going to do anything about it.
It was interesting because nobody really knew how this was going to go down. But that's how it went down.
All
Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C.,
all right, I said.
Kevin McCarthy, this is the Washington Post doing an okay job from both sides there. Peter Baker's the worst. Dan Baltz isn't the worst.
All right.
He's just Mr. The Village in capital
in the middle
letters and scare quotes.
Centrist.
Kevin McCarthy turns impeachment into political score settling. The House Speaker directed an impeachment inquiry into President Biden based on allegations, in scare quotes, making the process a debasement of what was intended to be a constitutional vehicle to remove a president for malfeasance, and ends with he's claimed the impeachment inquiry is a natural step, but the burden of proof remains with McCarthy and his Republican colleagues. Not a bad piece outlining the fact that McCarthy's doing this because he's embattled.
Well, that was an interesting phrase he used, political score settling, because if you say it was political tit for tat, then you're equating them with Democrats, who are the ones who always do that with impeachments.
Exactly right. So it was a much better way to do it.
Yeah, they get their own term. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're videotaping you watching or listening to the show, as all theaters do, apparently. And we see what you're up to, wherever you are. And don't worry, though, we won't tell anybody. We're better at keeping secrets than the Buell Theater in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah. So the New York Times gives a good example of what Margaret Sullivan was talking about.
Oh.
Top Democrats' bullishness on Biden 2024 collides with voters' worries. And as I think G. Elliott Morris properly said, look.
G. Elliott.
It's very straightforward. You simply should not and cannot pay any attention whatsoever to polls this far out. People aren't engaged. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. Let me repeat that. They mean nothing. Laksha Jain, who works at Straight Ticket, which is turning out to be a very good political prediction outfit, says, go outside, take a walk, play video games, watch TV, visit relatives, unless you're unmarried and in your 20s, then don't do that.
Oh, all right.
There's 900 more enjoyable and fruitful things to do than read about the latest 2024 presidential poll in 2023. So just
Well, yeah.
don't do it. So the point there
I'm for that.
is that the Times and others just talk about poll after poll after poll. Well, what they should say, that's a meaningless poll after meaningless poll after meaningless poll.
Yeah.
What the
you could do
voters
that.
want is perfection. And it's their right to complain when they don't get it. That has nothing to do with who they're going to wind up voting for in 2024. Not only are a ton of events going to happen between now and then that'll change the character of the election, but I wouldn't necessarily want a Trump-Biden matchup because I don't want Trump to be in any position to be anywhere near the ballot box.
Yeah, right. I'd prefer
I would
anything
love
else.
I don't know, 78-year-old combination of Buttigieg, Biden, Harris, and Clinton merged into one person
Okay.
to run for but you know what? Doesn't exist. No. So what we look at is what his accomplishments are and what his policies are. We all know policies don't win elections. And the fact that Democrats in particular are confronted with the fact that you actually have to look at policies and what he's done in order to make decisions makes them unhappy. They want Camelot. They want 1960. They want somebody they can fall in love with. Hasn't happened since then. Although they were okay with Clinton in that regard.
Oh, yeah.
And Obama,
true.
yeah, he did it for him, mostly. We want that again. Well, you're not getting it.
Oh.
That isn't the time. This isn't the era. We're talking about democracy on the line. We're not going with, your feelings.
Yeah, F your feelings. I have a T-shirt
pretty
for
much,
you.
about who you fall in love with. That's not the deal. This is pull up your big boy and big girl pants
and keep them up.
Get real about democracy and its work. And yeah, you don't like and eat your damn vegetable stuff, And so that's why it's going to be really painful because the media hates that. That just, it's not horse race and nobody's going to click if you talk about that. And so that's why you have to concentrate on, well, he's old. I have that story already written, but I can take it from another angle because remember yesterday when I said he was old, he's a day older today.
No, that's true.
That's news. That's breaking.
Yeah. Well, they could have gone with the Lauren Boebert story, but they chose not to.
So they did that anyway. So I thought it was interesting
that
the Times would even put something like that up. But I think that Georgia and the Georgia case is still the thing that's continuing to make news. There's always hearings.
Good. Yeah, it's always available.
Unfortunately, with federal hearings, no electronic devices, no taping. So if you're going to talk about Mark Meadows' latest move, you got to get, tweet reports and then read about it later. It's not like Georgia where you get to watch it on TV. But this was interesting, I thought, also in The Guardian. And again, as Christine Amanpour points out, sometimes foreign correspondents do a better job covering America than American correspondents do. Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis turns on malignant narcissist ex-president.
Oh, I didn't even know that. And thanks, Guardian, for telling me.
Ellis, one of 18 Trump associates charged in Georgia election subversion case, says she simply can't support him again. That's because he's not paying for her lawyers.
It was because he's not supporting her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ellis was one of 18 Trump associates charged with him in Georgia over attempts to overturn Biden's victory there, charged with violating state anti-racketeering laws and solicitation of violation of an oath by a public officer. She was granted a $100,000 bail, pleaded not guilty, denying all wrongdoing and claiming political persecution. Trump also faces 4 federal counts related to election subversion, 40 federal counts related to retention of, and they list all the stuff he's done wrong, which is really what they ought to start every question on Meet the Press with. Given the fact that you've got 61 federal counts against you and
just
state
that,
counts and everything else, how do you justify running?
Because reasons. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next question. No follow-up here. Nonetheless, Trump leads polling regarding the 2024 Republican presidential primary. The primary polling is probably accurate, even if the 2024 general election is not.
Oh, okay. Important distinction.
Trump has a big lead, and he's going to be the nominee.
Right. No, we should point that out, because if he does get that nomination, you said the polls were wrong. Oh, not those polls, the other polls. And we won't just be doing that as a dodge.
So this is interesting piece because, there are foreign correspondents and they need to tell their readers what's going on here. So they do, which is something that the American press usually doesn't.
And maybe that's the only
Jenna
reason.
Ellis is a former counsel for the Thomas More Society, a conservative Catholic group whose claims to be a constitutional lawyer have been widely doubted.
That doesn't have anything to do with the Thomas More Society. It's just she's the one they're doubting. Yeah, no, that's great. That's good reporting. You're right. They have to identify the players, whereas we here just assume you know who they are, pretty much.
Described by the New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman as, quote, a lawyer whom Trump sought out after seeing her television commentary.
Yeah.
That's the in-depth stuff they do on Ellis.
Yeah.
In 2020,
right.
Ellis rose from relative obscurity to become part of what she called an elite strike force team working to overturn Trump's defeat by Biden. That effort failed. American Family Radio signed up Ellis in December last year. On her show on Thursday, she spoke to Steve Deese, another right-wing host.
Okay.
Deese said, before that man, Trump, needs to be president again to escape the quote-unquote witch hunts. That man, Trump, needs Jesus again because his ambitions would be fueled by showing some self-awareness, and he won't do it because he can't admit I'm not God. Now, this conversation is interesting because you may recall coming across Jenna Ellis tweet saying, I've been indicted, the Lord Jesus will save me, et cetera, on Twitter. And it's like, where is that coming from? Actually, that's who she is.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yes. If you were wondering whether that was something she picked up recently in order to try to get out of an indictment. No, she always believed that. Okay. I mean,
she basically is a right-wing nutjob evangelical.
Yeah. And then she went on TV once, and then she became like White House lawyer or something.
Right, exactly. But everything that you just said resonates with me, Jenna Ellis speaking, is exactly why I simply can't support him for elected office again. Why I have chosen to distance is because of that, frankly, malignant, narcissistic tendency to simply say that he's never done anything wrong, and the total idolatry that I'm seeing from some of the supporters that are unwilling to put the Constitution and the country and the conservative principles above their love for a star is really troubling. And I think that we do need to, as Americans and as conservatives, and particularly as Christians, take this very seriously and understand where we are putting our vote. I thought that was a really interesting quote from her. Right. And this will play widely in Iowa, and it will make no difference whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, yes. Hey, that's weird. We should excommunicate her as a heretic. Oh, well, that's one solution.
Yeah. We should burn her. We should have an auto da fe.
Wow. Well, it's nice of her to say something about it again. Although I keep the article, because I have a feeling if everything goes wrong and everything goes to hell and Trump finds himself in power again, I have a feeling that Jenna Ellis will say, I never said anything like that. Yeah. So, I mean, he filled his first administration full of people who said this stuff during the primaries, lost the primaries, and then said he was awesome. And
Lindsey Graham, for example.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now, some of them find themselves unindicted.
Well, go back to the Texas impeachment vote.
Yes. Let's do that.
For reasons that include the concept that I am so bad at everything, this is the only job I can hold down. Then you don't want to lose that job. And if you don't want to lose that job, you will do anything to keep it. And when I say anything, I mean anything.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there always used to be jobs waiting for them after they were out of office.
Only if you're good.
Yeah, that's true. You have to retire, or you have to have an honorable discharge.
You have to do what we tell you.
Yeah, and then you can be a lobbyist, consultant type person later on, or whatever Rick Santorum is. What is he?
Anyway, we were talking about the Steve Bannon and the right-wing outlets that you've never heard of, that I've never heard of, that are trying to prop up Ken Paxton successfully so far. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I thought this particular article was interesting. This is from the October 2023 issue of Commentary.
Already.
It's always difficult for me to see the name Commentary and not think of Woody Allen's joke when he was a stand-up comic about, I read that Commentary and Dissent have merged and now they're called Dysentery.
Okay. Hey, that sounds like a clown.
I'm sorry,
horn
it's
there.
funny. Whatever you think of Woody Allen, that's a funny joke. The Left of the Right, it's called. It's by Matthew Continetti. Mm-hmm. And he talks about things like, he's talking about the right wing and what it's become.
Okay.
He says it is really interesting from his perspective. If you tuned in to the first Republican Party presidential debate of the 2024 cycle, you may have suffered ideological whiplash. The 8 candidates on stage in Milwaukee, minus the frontrunner Donald Trump far and away, argued every which way over legal, economic, social, and foreign policy questions. The party's ideological and policy incoherence was on full display. Did Mike Pence do the right thing? Where should Republicans draw the line on abortion? Does military aid to Ukraine and Israel make America stronger? Is an indicted and possibly convicted Trump an electoral asset or a liability? No consensus, but genuine conflict. Mike Pence and Nikki Haley jousted over pro-life policy. Haley went after her fellow Tim Scott on federal spending. Asa Hutchinson suggested the 14th Amendment disqualifies Trump. Everybody piled on Vivek Ramaswamy, who stole the show by flouting conventional option and opinion, generating controversy, and otherwise behaving like an obnoxious know-it-all. Ramaswamy said the former and current elected officials on stage were bought and paid for. He kept referring to former Vice President Pence as Mike. His glib manner, changing opinions, and utter shamelessness irritated his fellow candidates, but his smugness paid dividends. At this writing, he has moved into third place in the Real Clear Politics average in national polls, which, I don't pay too much attention to Real Clear Politics anymore since they cherry-pick polls. But that's probably true. Again, as I said, the primary polls are probably more accurate at this particular point in time than anything you could read about for 2024. 7 points behind Ron DeSantis and 47 points behind Trump. Ramaswamy's the sort of figure who could exist only in the shadow of the former president, a hyperactive operator cynically using the populist social media ecosystem to advance his personal brand. I just think it's pretty clear that Ramaswamy, of all the people on the stage, is the one who knows what each and every one of those outlets I read off are, who writes for them, what's on them.
Maybe he's been there. Yeah.
That's the thing. Ramaswamy embodies the GOP's current crisis. Republicans haven't issued a platform since 2016, and it shows. It's not morning in America, Ramaswamy told Pence. We live in a dark moment, and we have to confront the fact that we're in an internal sort of cold cultural civil war. And this vision has put Ramaswamy at the vanguard of the Republican Party's newest new right. He speaks for those Republicans, many of them young and very online, who believe the GOP ought to be remade in Trump's image. And they basically reject Reaganism. And then he goes on to say the interesting parts. The first thing to say about the new right is that it can get weird.
Well, that's true.
Its ranks are composed almost entirely of men. They inhabit a social media cocoon where they talk a lot about manhood, strength, manliness, push-ups, masculinity, virility, weightlifting, manliness, and testosterone. Manliness and also manliness.
Yes.
Wrestling should be mandated in middle school. Right.
Oh, they're pro-mandate.
And Scott Yen are in the collection Up From Conservatism. Students could learn to build and shoot guns as part of a normal course of action in schools and learn how to grow crops and prepare them for meals. Every male student could learn to skin an animal. Every female should milk a cow.
Wow. It's not only is it loony, but I mean, wow, even archaic. And yeah, I think the answer obviously is to build your guns in school. That's what we need. Not only do we need more guns, not only do we need them in school, we need to build them. Yes, but cow milking for the ladies.
Right.
Okay.
Home economics for them.
Sure.
The second aspect of the new right that deserves attention is its flirtation with anti-Semitism and racial bigotry. Earlier this year, one of the contributors to Up From Conservatism, the international relations scholar Richard Hanania, was revealed to have written hateful internet posts under a pseudonym. The pro-Trump Breitbart reported that Pedro Gonzalez, an associate editor at Chronicles, a magazine of American culture, who boosts DeSantis, had a history of anti-Semitism. Around the same time, DeSantis fired speechwriter Nate Hochman, a new right wunderkind who had promoted an online video incorporating neo-Nazi imagery. We talked about that on the show. Most new right writers shy away from explicit racism and anti-Semitism. Some are more interested in foreign policy. Others focus on economics. All of them, however, share one quality. They sound more like left-wing progressives than actual conservatives. For example, wants to cut aid to America's allies, spend the money on domestic concerns.
That doesn't really actually sound like it, but okay.
Well,
domestic concerns, yes.
Don't spend so much on defense. Spend more on social services.
Yeah, well, they slipped.
That's not untrue. It's a stretch, but
defense,
it's not.
Yes,
it's not without a grain of truth.
Foreign aid, that's you guys actually,
right?
But okay.
But it's interesting that in trying to describe what the new right is. The part that I think is, and he names names, and particularly shallow ones. And it's just said, the conservative movement, of which I am a part, has completely lost its bearings. And when you look at the people who are representing the new right, like Ramaswamy, they've completely lost their minds. Well, so I think it was an interesting article from that perspective.
Yes. Good point made there, certainly. He's a conservative. He has to sneak in a dig, and he did it inappropriately and incorrectly with who they sound like, but okay. Fine, we'll dismiss that.
Well, basically, they sound like to me as a conservative.
Yes. Someone who didn't understand them.
Like my fantasy of what Bernie Sanders was probably saying.
Yeah, right. And I guess you could give them points for saying, well, I don't understand left-wing progressives, and I don't understand these new right guys, so they sound alike to me. I don't understand either one of them. They both say things I don't understand. Well, they're not the same.
If I'm speaking to somebody who's speaking Chinese to me, and I'm speaking to somebody on the other side who's speaking Portuguese to me, and I don't understand either one.
Yes.
What's the difference?
It's a horseshoe, not a spec. Yeah, okay, so there's many things I don't understand, to my left and to my right, and they're not the same because I don't understand them. They go in the same basket, but they're not the same. I don't understand it. Right. Okay, there we go. I think that'll settle that one. All right. He has a point. It's on his head, but it's a point nonetheless.
Right. So I guess we should try to keep up with what the Republicans are doing.
All right. If you wish.
It's hard, but as far as I can tell, House Republicans have gotten their factions together without Kevin McCarthy and agreed to some sort of framework for a continuing resolution, which the Senate is likely to completely reject. I'm giving you this deal came together last night. I'm giving you a piece from the Washington Post on it. You can see the picture
who's that
of Dusty Johnson, Republican, South Dakota.
It's a real name?
One of 6 Republicans who worked out a short-term funding proposal. It's not only a real name, it's also a real picture. The guy looks like he's a 14-year-old going to, go with your mom to work day.
Yeah, kind of. Well, okay, good for you. Youth serum. Hyaluronic acid, I guess he's using it. The guys are into it now.
Yeah, I suppose.
He's a young fella.
So they're suggesting a 1% cut to everything as part of the continuing resolution. But in order to do that, they've decided that what they're going to do is not touch defense or the Veterans Administration, and therefore that means cutting 8% from everything else.
I see. Right. Across the board, except for these parts of the board.
1%, except for the ones that we think
not this
would be
part of the
politically
board.
bad. And so we're just going to cut social services.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why it's going nowhere in the Senate.
Yeah. Dusty Johnson, not young. Not very young, by the way. So he's,
no, he just looks young.
Yeah, he's 47.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a young-looking fella. Dusty.
Yeah, he's 47 going on 23. Some people
he doesn't look like he's
that.
Been ranching.
Some people would love to have that,
Yeah.
Rather than 23 going on 47 like Alex Jones.
Yes.
You look at Alex Jones and you'd think he's 25 years older than he is.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody has some attribute. You'd think though, like South Dakota, you want to go for the grizzled ranch hand kind of thing, but he's not been outside a lot, I don't think.
Yeah, basically, what the point is of all these pictures is it doesn't scream gravitas at you when you see it.
No.
And the fact that this was all done without Kevin McCarthy is weird.
Yeah, usually he has some hand in directing policy or directions of...
Right. Not Kevin McCarthy. The speaker has a hand.
No, you're right. Yeah, that's a good...
Kevin McCarthy is completely incompetent, so I have
He's
no
rarely
idea.
had a hand in anything. It's just he's never been speaker before. And
For
he's
example,
not now.
Rules Committee. And whatever they do has to get through Rules Committee. Now, normally,
and they hate him.
I refer to Rules Committee as, wait for it, the Speaker's Committee.
Right, because it is. But
it's not Kevin McCarthy's committee.
No. That's true. Though he says he's the Speaker.
So he says.
Well, okay. He's not,
So
and I guess that leaves room for
does he get
Dusty
the rules?
Johnson.
We'll have to see that.
Yeah. And as he's got some opponents there. Although I suppose they will like the fact that he had nothing to do with it. And we may find out in the end what he had to do with it was, I want you to tell everybody that had nothing to do with it, so that the Rules Committee and others who would stop it if they thought I did have something to do with it don't find out I have something to do with it, and they accept it. Can you do that, Dusty? Maybe.
Right. So we'll see. I mean, he's not like Chip Roy, who we know has incredible influence.
Yes. You know something? I'm looking at this picture of Dusty Johnson from the Washington Post, and I said, how old is Dusty Johnson? And I went to his Wikipedia page. And do you know, he's wearing the same tie and maybe everything else, too. Oh, no, he's changed his shirt.
Oh, that's good.
But he's wearing the same tie and the same jacket. He's got only the one, the red and yellow rep stripe tie. And he's probably got more. He's 46.
So Olivia Beavers, after this deal, reports Matt Gaetz is a no, telling me, quote, I will not support this 167-page surrender to Joe Biden, end quote.
Okay. Get a page out of there. Make it 166.
And Matt Glassman, who's a very good congressional observer, says, I cannot fathom the bill, even a messaging bill, that Gaetz would actually support at this point. He and the other fire readers are just against moving the process forward in the House, preferring either a shutdown or a throwdown with McCarthy after he deals with Democrats. And that's, in fact, a good observation. That's where all of this is going.
I don't think there's any reason. He would not look at this and say, this works for me, to say I support this thing. If I say I support it, they'll stop asking me what I think of it and stop interviewing me. So you say no as a holdout so that they keep coming back to you. What do you think now? Oh, I don't think anything about this bill. I never did. But I do have this to say. Boom, whatever it is. So, yeah, no, he's not going to support anything either.
Yeah.
Dusty Johnson should fight him.
It's not like I actually read it. Yeah,
well, right, that's true. Well, he did look. He read one thing. What's the number on the last page? 167? Okay. I won't support this. 160, there's something inherently wrong with it being 167 pages. It makes it sound long and complicated, and people who are for simple solutions like America used to have, or whatever, can, I don't know. Okay, so that's interesting. Matt Gaetz, not for it. Neither is his forehead, an independent entity that represents an entirely different district. But they get 2 votes between them. So it's important to interview him. All right. Well, so that's where we stand. There is a CR on the table that has across-the-board cuts that aren't across the board and something.
Right.
That's pretty much all there is to it, I guess.
The old Bill Gates and I walked into a bar and the average income was...
yeah. Okay. Dusty Johnson cuts an interesting figure as I'm looking over his Wikipedia thing. As I said, he doesn't look like he's spent a lot of time as a ranch hand, and I guess not. He's the youngest ever this and the youngest ever that, and I guess he stayed young and kept his skin soft and supple by moving from government check to government check, of course, all the while being...
Well, these are the kinds of guys that if you threaten them with a primary, you get scared because, what else do they do?
Right. He's in Kristi Noem's seat in the House.
What?
She may have been in... Remember, she was once in the Congress.
Remember Kristi Noem? She's the one that was having an affair with Corey Lewandowski.
Yeah, right. And then she left her job in Congress to do more of that, I guess, to be more free for that. And he took her seat.
The fun thing was...
she went to Beetlejuice or something. And,
the fun thing was wondering, on the one hand, whether Marjorie Taylor Greene leaked the affair that Corey Lewandowski was having with Kristi Noem.
Yeah.
Because they're rivals for the vice presidency for Trump.
Yeah.
And
I thought you might also have leaked
Marjorie
the
Taylor
video
Greene
of
leaked the
Lauren
video
Boebert.
on Lauren Boebert because they don't like each other.
That was all untrue. We had the videotape not because they were looking for people filming the performance, but because Marjorie Taylor Greene was looking for dirt on Lauren Boebert. And it worked.
And it
Who
worked.
knew?
And it just
You
might
film
work.
her long enough, you'll get something.
Right.
All right.
And
Wow.
last piece, as we end our segment here, because it's just about that hour, is a really interesting piece from David French, who writes the most interesting element of the Hunter Biden indictment. Basically goes through a gun safety legal perspective history. Right?
Okay.
And says the funny thing is that the Republicans have set it up so that you can basically have less and less control over anything about guns.
Yeah.
And that means that Hunter Biden may skate on the gun charge because it may be found unconstitutional. So you may have this situation where Joe Biden's family business actually loosens gun control, which is not what he wanted.
No.
But then again, Hunter Biden skates on this, which is not what Republicans wanted.
Yeah.
So be careful what you wish for. Sometimes you may get it.
Right. Well, they always say, well, we don't need more gun laws. We got to enforce the ones already on the books. And then,
well, you can't even enforce those anymore because,
they're all unconstitutional, according to you.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Yeah, I mean, that did strike me early on that I thought you guys were for no restrictions on gun ownership whatsoever. Well, not if you're Hunter Biden or otherwise a person I don't like. Well, that's true. So gimmitarianism over and over again. That's par for the course.
Right. Let's end this with a piece of satire from Nicholas Grossman, who writes at Ars Digital. I think he's the editor there. And he tweeted something for whatever reason that struck my funny bone. Probably won't anybody else's. But he said, Tucker Carlson is now the most watched pundit alive, according to Elon Musk, by the way, with hundreds of millions more viewers than anybody else in the world. That's why you see people sharing and criticizing his content so much more now, and why pundits are quitting TV shows en masse to chase his massive success.
Yes, everybody's leaving for Twitter shows instead.
Yes, except they're not.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, Musk's claim is, well, look at the views of the video that he circulates of what he calls a television show. And I don't know. I didn't look. And they're no more. They're certainly not verified in any way, shape, or form. And I mean, I guess it used to be everyone knew what outrageous thing Tucker Carlson had said over the weekend. Do you know what he said over the weekend? I don't. And I'm glad of it. Fantastic. Deplatforming works, everybody. Keep doing it. And we'll replatform you on Wednesday. How about that? No objections. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The one thing Greg wasn't able to shoehorn in, another reference to the House about to be jammed by the Senate on budget exchanges and appropriations exchanges, really, and just pointing out how once again, you highlight a certain term, and then like the Wilhelm scream, you start to see it everywhere, and you can't avoid it, and you never miss it anytime it's mentioned. So there we go. Oh, there's the roofing is happening. Excellent. The doorbell rang. It was answered thanks to the production staff, and all is well. All is right with the world. Maybe a little bit noisy, but that's okay. All right, let's see. Greg was just commenting about that. And so you can actually hear occasional pounding going on up there. A few shingles being replaced. I wouldn't be asking Dusty Johnson to do this anytime soon. By the way, for those of you intrigued by my interest in his history, he is 46, and out in South Dakota, it pays to have that weather-beaten, grizzled look going on. But I guess he's not been. Like I said, he's not an outdoor person. That's okay. Totally normal. But I guess if you were wondering what sort of guy is he, like I said, he started his career by being the youngest of everything. He was the youngest, and who cares, really, about what he was. He was the youngest utilities commissioner in the nation. How do you like that? In 2004, according to Wikipedia, Johnson was elected to the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. He was the youngest utilities commissioner in the nation. This would have been 2004, meaning he was 30. or thereabouts. What was he? Was he under 30? Born in 1976. So 86, 96, 2006. So 28. Elected to the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. That's not super young or anything. It's just that nobody cares about public utilities commissions, and maybe that's an old person's job. I don't know. But looks like he was, outstanding high school scholar and honors in graduating in the honors in political science in 1999, and et cetera, et cetera. Went on to get a master's of public policy immediately. So from high school to college to graduate school. And, let's see. And then, became named a Truman Scholar, and, thereapon went to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington I guess right afterwards in 1998. Then he returned to South Dakota as a senior policy advisor to then South Dakota Governor Mike Rounds, and then immediately on to the Utilities Commission, where he was the youngest commissioner, etc., and then has stayed in government jobs the whole time. So high school, college, graduate school, Truman Scholarship, Department of Agriculture paycheck, Governor of South Dakota paycheck. He wasn't the governor, but he was working for the governor. And then the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission paycheck. And then, let's see, in 2011, he resigned his Public Utilities Commission position to become Governor Dennis Daugaard's chief of staff, another government paycheck. And then he had a private sector career. It is noted separately here from 2014 to 2018. So he's got huge background in the private sector. What was he doing? He resigned as chief of staff to the governor, leaving the public sector to work for Vantage Point Solutions in Mitchell, South Dakota. I don't know what that is. You could look it up, though. With fellow Truman Scholar Tony Venhuizen. Fellow Truman Scholar Tony Venhuizen succeeded Johnson as Daugaard's chief of staff. Johnson resigned his position with Vantage Point Solutions in 2018 upon his accession to Congress. Dun, da, da, da. So good 4 years, solid 4 years in the private sector. What was he doing? I don't know. The whole summary of his private sector career is that he had one, and it lasted these number of years, and he was employed by Vantage Point Solutions. No word on what he solved during that time. But then back to the public paycheck because of what a libertarian he is. Anyway, wants a across the board something. Oh, here's a nice note. How about this? In case you were wondering, is he a total lunatic or is he only a partial lunatic because he remains a Republican in the age when, as was noted in the shows at the end of last week, the 2012 Republican nominee for president, Mitt Romney, spends $5 million a year on security to protect his family from the death threats being imposed by the 2016 Republican Party nominee for president, Donald Trump. What do you think? He, while in Congress, has joined, first of all, a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. So there you go. That sounds pretty good. He went from Vantage, what was it? The Policy Solutions. What was the name of the place? Vantage Point Solutions. He was solving things, and then he became a Problem Solver Caucus member. So a theme in his life. And it says here that in 2019, he was one of 14 Republicans to vote with all of the House Democrats to override President Trump's veto of a measure revoking Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. That's interesting. He, likewise, in May of 2021, was one of 35 Republicans who joined the Democrats in voting to approve legislation to establish the January 6th Commission. But, of course, they couldn't get a commission going, so they ended up having a committee do it. And then, during the second vote to oust Liz Cheney, Johnson was among the few House Republicans who voted to keep her as conference chair. I don't know if I'm quite as excited. I mean, we know what message we're meant to take from that. But then again, like, yay, he voted for Liz Cheney. Yeah, but I mean, remember that before this whole business with the January 6th committee, she was a lunatic and we thought she was crazy. And she still is, largely on most public policy issues. But, this sets him apart from this a little bit. And, I guess pretty soon, if he tries to work too hard to broker this deal, then eventually, I guess Matt Gaetz will say no to it, and then they'll all say, he's secretly working on behalf of Kevin McCarthy to get this done, who made a deal with him that he would say he had nothing to do with it, but he really does, and even if he doesn't, they'll just say that this is the case, and they'll construct a conspiracy theory. I've just constructed it for him. It's very simple. And that'll be the end of Dusty Johnson, and he'll have to go out and get a new private sector career and a new tie. Anyway, so I don't know. He may be, not the craziest, most fire-breathing right-wing wacko that they have to offer. We knew that was the case. Okay, now back to the news. Just giving you some backgrounder on him. Just get some sense of who is this player that we haven't heard of before. And Dusty Johnson does sound like the fake name you would use to go on a date with Lauren Boebert, though, doesn't it? Anyway. Oh, and by the way, I think we're only about 5 minutes from the Lauren Boebert story turning from her apologizing to her blaming Democrats for all this. I did see they were working hard, some other people, working hard over the weekend to try to come up with an angle on this, and they did. It's the guy that she went on the date with may actually himself may be a Democrat. It's true. And not only is he a Democrat, he owns a bar somewhere, he owns a bar. I mean, she owned a restaurant, so maybe they met at the local chapter of the National Restaurant Association or something like that. Anyway, he owns a bar, but he owns not just a bar. It's a bar where they have fairly recently had, and he has defended this, drag shows. Which is interesting, all by itself. And so, as other people have pointed out over the weekend, by the way, they went to this musical. It was Beetlejuice. I understand there may have even been like kids in the audience because I don't know. Is the show? I can't remember. I remember Beetlejuice. I don't remember ever. I didn't view it as a parent trying to decide whether or not my kids could see it. My kids had no interest in seeing it ever. So it never crossed my mind. But, I guess it's family-friendly programming, and people were saying that there were maybe some kids in the audience, and then here they were acting up in their particular way, right in front of the kids. So they were pointing out, they were getting all sexual in front of an audience of children. They weren't in front of the audience. They were in the middle of the audience. But they did say, some sexual activity right in the middle of an audience with kids present. Who was doing that? Well, not a drag queen, as it turns out, but rather the very presumably anti-drag queen, because she's still a nutcase Republican, Lauren Boebert. Anyway, so I'm wondering whether if by the end of the day, or at least by the end of the week, the story is going to become that she was entrapped in some way by this evil Democrat who loves having groomers at his bar, etc. And the whole thing was a setup to get her. But I mean, so far, no. And I guess there's always the chance that Lauren actually, maybe cares about the guy a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's crediting her too much, but maybe she likes him, and that would be nice, especially if she said, I actually care about this one particular person to the extent that I don't really want to be attacking him in the news for my own political survival. I'd rather just go the apologize route and see what happens. It would be pretty interesting if that were the case, but it would be a lot more predictable if it went the other way. So, okay. Let's see. What other things did I want to bring to your attention here? A few things that are grabbed from social media, but Pocket won't tell me what they are unless I open them. So bear with me as I do that. Let's see. Oh, yes, right. Okay, well, let's see. That I can save for later. I should check the other inputs and make sure that we're not missing anything here. Oh, there's a few. Let's see. Ricky, our second Canadian input here, who says, I'm playing video games and listening to you guys. Perfect Monday morning on KITM. Okay, so a little bit of distraction there as well. So it just doesn't matter very much that there's hammers going in the background, and it's been pretty quiet, honestly. They must be, maybe they're fixing the roof with glue or Velcro, something very quiet. And Mighty OCD wants another shot at things here. Let's see. The liberal redneck did a bit about Boebert last week that might be his best video yet. Oh, okay. Well, this is more of a personal programming note. I think that we could go, but yes, it's the first 2 minutes and 45 seconds. You should watch it, but we'll just get in trouble if we play 2 minutes and 45 seconds of somebody else's video. Though we could have them on as a guest and they could do the routine here live and on the air. But well recommended there, and I'll take a look at that, and maybe we'll find some way to incorporate that into the show at some point in the future when we have a chance to figure out exactly what we'll be using. All right. And I got to check in on 35 different inputs here in order to be sure I'm not missing anything. It's difficult to deal with one screen and Mastodon and Twitter and Blue Sky and email and all the other things, the other ways. So bear with me. I'll check the old KITM hashtag, which is appropriately diminishing in volume as we migrate away from Twitter, which is probably the best solution anyway. All right. Let's see, other news articles to share. Yeah, there was the disappointing news of the Ken Paxton acquittal, but I guess we should have anticipated that. Let's see. Oh, some other news, though. Let's get to some of the other things, some of which might be long reads here. Politico on the short side here. Not news per se, but just reinforcing a similar years-long theme, a Politico piece that I put aside. Prosecutors ring the alarm. There's a lot of work by the prosecutors on the Jack Smith side. Gag orders for Trump, plus a couple other motions made in court. It looks like two separate motions. Prosecutors ring the alarm. Trump could trigger violence. The Politico report is. Subheader reads, the new filings are part of a months-long legal battle between the company now called X. You can just go ahead and call them Twitter. It bothers Elon Musk, apparently, a great deal for people to call it Twitter. Stop calling it Twitter, call it X, he says. Great irony in that, and no need to really spend that much time explaining why. Just take away the fact that it bothers Musk a lot, enough for him to whine about it constantly on Twitter. That should be motivation enough for you. Anyway, let's take a look at what's going on here. Kyle Cheney reporting this for Politico. Federal prosecutors secretly argued in April, only finding out now, I guess, that if Donald Trump learned of their efforts to access his Twitter account, his public disclosure of the development could, quote, precipitate violence. So separate from the gag order motion filings these days, we have this one. Newly unsealed court filings show that attorneys working for special counsel Jack Smith worried that Trump would publicly announce the search warrant of his Twitter, on his Twitter feed, really. Of his Twitter feed. Okay. Not just a search warrant for documents in Mar-a-Lago, but a different one. The search warrant for his Twitter feed. They wanted to see whether there were any, I guess, deleted messages or direct messages that were not public, but that might provide evidence for use in 1 or 2 or 15 of the cases against him. So the Smith worried that Trump would publicly announce a search warrant of his Twitter feed, just like he announced on Truth Social when his Mar-a-Lago estate was searched by the FBI last year. That announcement was followed by a surge in threats against federal law enforcement, culminating in the fatal shooting, don't forget this one, of a man who had attempted to breach an FBI building in Cincinnati. We almost forgot about that one. don't think there's nothing illegal about it. If they execute a search warrant on you and you feel like telling people that you were the subject of a search warrant, ordinarily people do not want to comment on it a great deal. It's nobody else's business. No one else is supposed to know about it. Law enforcement, I guess, can discuss if they want to. The fact that they served a search warrant, you can discuss if you want. The fact that one was served on you, generally people don't. But what makes it different when Donald Trump does it is that he basically, he'll go on social media and say, what really makes me mad? The people I really wish somebody would take care of in one way or another. Won't someone rid me of this meddlesome FBI priest who served this search warrant on my house or Twitter feed or whatever? And then people go and do it. And they remind us, yes, somebody got themselves shot to death trying to attack an FBI building in Cincinnati right after Trump said the FBI is a bunch of dirty, rotten thieves and liars for doing this to me at Mar-a-Lago. Informing Trump about the Twitter search warrant could precipitate violence, as occurred following the public disclosure of the search warrant executed at Mar-a-Lago, the prosecutors warned. Well, this all took place in April, and we're only finding out now. The new filings, part of a months-long legal battle between Twitter, now called X, although I wouldn't bother saying so, and the special counsel's team over whether the social media company, newly purchased by Elon Musk, could inform Trump about the search warrant the investigators had obtained before it complied with its directive. So an extra wrinkle here. It's not just a matter as between prosecutors and Trump. They're not searching his physical premises. They're searching Twitter. So the warrant is as against Twitter. And Twitter was saying we should be allowed to inform Trump of the search. And the prosecutor said, well, one, that doesn't necessarily follow, and two, we would seek to bar you from doing that because of the unique circumstances involved here. Trump will use this to incite violence against somebody, whoever's serving the warrant, the FBI, federal law enforcement in general, maybe Twitter too, so it might not be a great idea for you, but, you do you. But prosecutors, and ultimately the U.S. District Court judge in this case, Beryl Howell, scoffed at the suggestion. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have missed what the suggestion was. Yes. We did read it, but I forgot the last part. The company, that would be Twitter, suggested that some of Trump's private communications on the platform could be subject to executive privilege and wanted to afford him opportunity to assert it. That was their reasoning here. Why are you going to tell Donald Trump that we're serving a search warrant against you? And they say, well, it's not me that's worried. I'm worried that he might not, if he doesn't know about it, he won't have the chance to assert executive privilege over his public tweets or his private DMs. And that's what led to the scoffing because, of course, you would say, what business would a president have in asserting executive privilege over the contents of his Twitter feed? And the answer is no normal president would have that assertion to make because, of course, you don't use Twitter for actual official business. Those are the only things over which you would be entitled to claim executive privilege anyway. But only Donald Trump would be so dumb and so bold as to, one, try to conduct public business over Twitter, and two, try to pretend that it was then privileged after publishing it on social media. But even if he didn't publish it, even if it was direct message, no, that's not a secure channel. That's not the place where you would be conducting official business. In fact, that would ordinarily, in a just society where there was no hypocrisy and gamitarianism, land you in the but his emails basket. You've been using an unsecured server for official communications. Don't you recognize that charge? Of course you don't. But, as we said, prosecutors and ultimately Judge Howell scoffed at that suggestion, as they should, and sharply rejected Twitter's notion that Trump's account might contain privileged material. Howell held Twitter in contempt in February, in fact, and fined the company a whopping, should have been bigger, but he's restricted, $350,000 for missing court-ordered deadlines to comply with the prosecutor's search warrant. Ultimately, the company provided the documents Smith's prosecutors demanded. In the new filing, Smith's team revealed that Trump's account had included just 32 direct messages, a minuscule proportion of the overall data it had obtained. Prosecutors had obtained also obtained data that could show Trump's location at the time certain tweets were sent or whether anyone else was accessing his account. Once again, not a safe thing or a reliable thing for the United States president to be using for official business, and so therefore it doesn't necessarily mean he didn't make that mistake, but it does mean that he probably should expect an awful lot less privacy and privilege in it. But the newly unsealed filings provide new details. Smith's arguments, the unsealed filings provide new details. Smith's arguments for keeping Trump in the dark about the search warrant, primarily that Trump presents a significant risk of tampering with evidence, seeking to influence or intimidate potential witnesses, and otherwise seriously jeopardizing the government's ongoing investigations. I feel like there was a word missing in the setup, but you get the gist now. These are not hypothetical considerations in this case, the prosecutors wrote in a 71-page brief dated April 21st. Following his defeat in the 2020 presidential election, the former president propagated false claims of fraud, including swearing to false allegations in a federal court filing, pressured state and federal officials to violate their legal duties, as is alleged by Fani Willis. I don't know if they actually alleged that in the federal indictment, but good dependence on the state indictment there. You see they are complementary. And retaliated against those who did not comply with his demands, culminating in violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Smith's team also cited the charges against Trump for seeking to undermine or otherwise influence the investigation into the potential mishandling of classified information following the end of his presidency, including publicizing the existence of the Mar-a-Lago warrant. So an interesting connection between the two cases there. The former president's obstructive efforts continue unabated with respect to this investigation here, in which he is determined to pay the legal fees of potential witnesses against him and repeatedly disparaged the lead prosecutor on his Truth Social platform. The prosecutors added, this pattern of obstructive conduct amply supports the district court's conclusion that the former president presents a significant risk of tampering with evidence, seeking to influence or intimidate potential witnesses, and otherwise seriously jeopardizing the government's ongoing investigations. Twitter's response to the prosecutors described the prospect of violence as facially implausible. That doesn't sound right at all. And contended that Trump already knew many details about Smith's investigation into his conduct leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. That part's probably true. His knowledge of the search warrant, the company contended, would not alter that equation. But, of course, it would. He would use it to launch more attacks. All right. Let's see. Where were we with the rest of this? But both Howell and the panel of D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, to which they took the case after they wouldn't take Howell's word for it and lost there too, ultimately rejected Twitter's arguments. The company is now seeking review by the full bench of the D.C. Circuit. So they're just like Trump. They've learned just keep litigating. We think that we should have been able to tell Trump about the warrant because he might have executive privilege claims to make. Judge Howell says, what? No, that's stupid. No way. Well, then we appeal. We take it to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And they say, what? No, that's stupid. No way. And then they say, well, now we want rehearing en banc of the full panel of the D.C. Circuit so that they have an opportunity to say, what? No, that way, that's stupid. And then he has to take it to the Supreme Court. And, well, I guess there's always a question about what they'll say there. Anyway, let's see. The company is now seeking review by the full panel, arguing that the three-judge panel, as well as Howell, failed to consider alternatives to demanding full compliance with the search warrant before giving Trump a chance to assert any privileges. Only because, they didn't fail. They considered it and said, no, there's no legal merit to your arguments. The company says one option would have been to inform a representative for Trump about the warrant while still keeping its details secret from the former president. Yeah. Prosecutors in Howell called such a proposal unworkable, and they're probably right about that one. Okay, so that was one of two developments towards the end of the week and then over the weekend in those cases. The other was, as covered here by the New York Times, special counsel seeking gag order on Trump in the election case. We'll have to save that one for after the break because, it's a sizable enough article, and we're about a minute away from the last break. I guess what I could tell you, though, I was reminded in this case, or in reading about the previous motion here. What was it exactly? Basically, just the various things that they were claiming about the judges being wrong or being biased or what have you. Did see this morning that Empty Wheel was writing about more crazy motion practice, and maybe I can put that one aside to discuss too. But he was, as you know, I think we've mentioned on the show that he is seeking to force the recusal of Judge Chutkan in this case, and making all sorts of wild assertions in support of that argument, including that we discussed this one, I think, at the end of last week, that she was obviously biased against him because she had apparently made comments in adjudicating some of the other January 6th cases that the defendants before her had said themselves in court, unprompted by the judge, of course, that they felt that they were compelled to show up on January 6th at Trump's behest. And so the fact that she repeated that they had said that was obviously evidence in his mind that she had drawn a conclusion that he was guilty and couldn't sit in this case, even though it had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Right. Well, we'll show you how Empty Wheel addresses that after this.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept a life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Hey, I'm told that the roofing repairs are over. So, a couple $100 later, I think we're going to be dry now. So that was good. That was quick. It wasn't such a big deal. It made for big impact inside, though. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything is fine. We'll find out in the next deluge, I guess, at which point it'll be a little too late to do anything about it then. But put buckets in the proper spots and then call them again. But I hope everything is patched up now. It was pretty obvious where the damage was. So fingers crossed, and that was it. Not too disruptive, as a matter of fact. So kudos to them for keeping it quiet. Maybe they were listening to the podcast as they were working. Okay, let's see. I mentioned to you that Empty Wheel was writing about another crazy motion that had been filed in this thing. And that's the Trump MO. They're flinging all the ketchup at all the walls to see what sticks. And the answer is ketchup sticks, but who cares? Because I'm not even certain really that metaphor helps a whole lot. Okay, there's lots of stuff stuck to the wall, but do we care? Like he threw it at a wall that doesn't matter, or he threw a plate of spaghetti that nobody cared about, and stuff is stuck to the wall. It's just not relevant to the case. Here, in this case, he was demanding the recusal of Judge Tanya Chutkan from his case in D.C. Empty Wheel treats it thus: there are a number of fairly insane claims made in Trump's reply seeking Judge Tanya Chutkan's recusal. Trump scolds that an impartial judge should express no opinion. And from his motion here, it says, consistent with the presumption of innocence and due process, an impartial court would ordinarily avoid stating any opinion regarding a third party's guilt or innocence until that party has received an opportunity to present a defense. And, well, what's he talking about? Well, no one knows because, as Marcy tells us, that is precisely what Chutkan did when she said, I have my opinions, but they are not relevant. She didn't express her opinion. By Trump's own definition, Chutkan is an impartial judge, but they just argue the opposite. Anyway, Trump makes a very narrow argument that the 8 additional defendants that Chutkan sentenced, who attributed their actions to Trump, mentioned by the prosecution, did not say Trump directed them to engage in violence, enter the Capitol, or interfere with the proceedings. That's Trump's claim. That is, the 8 defendants who definitely said Trump told me to do this, and that Chutkan said, well, these defendants say Trump told them to do this. But that's neither here nor there in terms of what I think. They said it, right? They're just claiming those 8 defendants never said that. But they did. And they nonetheless argue, none of these excerpts cited in footnote 1 to the response claim that President Trump directed or encouraged anyone to enter the Capitol or undertake violence or interfere with the proceedings at the Capitol. Of course, no such evidence exists, they claim. The defendants in those other cases obviously sought to explain the circumstances of their conduct, but that had no relevance to whether President Trump should be charged. That issue was never before the court prior to this case. Therefore, the only reasonable conclusion, and the very one that the prosecution consciously avoids, is that Judge Chutkan formed her disqualifying opinions from information outside of the courtroom. Well, Marcy has something to say about that, even ignoring that several of them did say Trump told them to go to the Capitol. That's still a distraction. I added the still there. As prosecutors have shown, one of the 2 defendants that Trump himself raised, I guess it mentioned publicly, Robert Palmer, literally said that he went to the Capitol, quote, at the behest of Trump, where, because he had been persuaded by Trump and others he needed to be to prevent the transition of power, he proceeded to serially assault cops. Trump simply ignores that one of the 2 cases he himself raised did precisely that. But the most bat crap, we'll say, you know how it is, bat crap claim, that one that I hope backfires wildly, Marcy says, is the claim that when Judge Chutkan said, I've seen video during the Christine Priola sentencing, there was no video in evidence before her. What are we saying? Let's clarify that. Trump is now claiming one of the things that makes Judge Chutkan biased is that she has said, well, I've seen video that convinces me that certainly convinces me at the very least that the defendants said that they had gone to the Capitol at Trump's behest. I've seen video. And their claim is, you haven't seen any video. There was no video in evidence in this case or that case. But once again, it's just another one of those things where it's like, there certainly was. Anybody who watched the case, and you know what? They keep records of this stuff. What happens during a case and what gets entered into evidence, and you just look it up and they're like, there's the video, there's a video, there's a video. There's lots of video. She'd seen tons of video. It's one of the dumbest things you could possibly say about the record that Judge Chutkan has compiled in these January 6th cases. It's endless video. She's seen tons of it. No one can explain, other than just sheer idiocy, hypocrisy, gimmitarianism, make up your own reality-ism, why Trump's lawyers would be asserting in front of a court that can sanction them for it, by the way. No one's talking about that just yet. But in front of a court that can hold them to account for it, why they're just saying, you've not seen any video. Of course I have. Of course I have. As she says, it's one of the most bat crap claims you could make. And the point of this article from Marcy is to say, you know what? Let's entertain that assertion just for fun. Let's have an evidentiary hearing to bear out the claim you make that Judge Chutkan had seen no video. Let's bring out the video that Judge Chutkan had actually seen by that point and show you that you're wrong, but show the rest of the world what video she had seen as well, because it's just another opportunity to run video of the violence at the Capitol perpetrated by people who said they were there at the now defendant's behest. Are you sure you want to do this? So, well, as she says, I hope this one backfires wildly, because this is what they say, that in addition to the sentencing memo that DOJ submitted in the Priola case, they formally noticed the following videos. This is what would happen, right? If they said, we contend that Judge Chutkan didn't see any video, there would be, and they entertained that as an assertion and said, Jack Smith, what do you guys have to say about the assertion that I've seen no video? Well, and Marcy takes an excerpt here that lists 7 different videos, and maybe an eighth, if I understand things correctly at the end here, video that had been entered into evidence and played a major part in the conviction of several other prior January 6th defendants. They're all listed here, and this is just from the Priola case. As a matter of fact, just 7 or 8 videos just for that one. Now, Marcy then returns to the commentary here. More importantly, there's all the other video Chutkan had seen by the point at which they say, the inflection point here for some reason is October 28th, 2022, which I guess is when she made the comment, I've seen video, which they think is bias. Well, by October 28th, 2022, if there's any question whether or not she'd seen video, it would be answered by those 8 plus more. As Marcy says, do you know how insane it is for someone to tell Judge Tanya Chutkan that by October 28th, 2022, the date of Priola's sentencing, she had not seen video evidence on which she could form an opinion about how central Trump was to January 6th? Do you have any idea how many hundreds of hours of video D.C. judges like Chutkan, pertaining to Priola and Chutkan's case, but also pertaining to the series of assault defendants whose detention proceedings she had presided over, and defendants sentenced before Priola, do you know how much she had seen by that point? Trump made the argument that by October 28th, 2022, Judge Tanya Chutkan had not seen sufficient evidence about January 6th to form an opinion about Trump's role in the attack. If I were Judge Chutkan, I'd order the hearing Trump claims he wants, refuse to waive his appearance, and force him, his attorneys, and the journalists only beginning to pay attention to January 6th, now that Trump has been charged, to review the video of the attack that she has sat through, or had sat through, by October of 2022. As one example, Chutkan presided over several spectacular assault cases, including one where a former Marine who had attended the TCF Center mob in Detroit after the election brought his hockey stick to the Capitol and used it to beat a cop. One of the many spectacularly brutal assaults that happened that day. Trump claims that during the year and a half of January 6th cases she had presided over by October 28th, 2022, Chutkan had not seen any evidence from which she could form an opinion about the event. By all means, let's put the evidence she had seen in the record. That would make for a fun hearing. But then remember, it's all moot anyway, because she still summarized the whole thing by saying, sure, I've seen that video evidence, and I have my opinions, but they don't matter. In this case, I'm sentencing you as a neutral arbiter of the law here. I have an opinion. You won't hear it. I'm not entering it into evidence. It doesn't pertain to this case. Do I have one? Yeah. Am I working to keep it out of the adjudication of this case so that I remain unbiased? Yes, that's what I'm doing. What do you know? That's pretty amazing that she's actually already addressed this ahead of time. Now, how insane is it, though, for Trump to sit there and say, you haven't seen any video, even though the record is replete with the videos she had seen? Well, it's about as insane as, let's say, going on Meet the Press and being confronted, one of the few times that the host is actually going to test you on something, by saying, you went to court on the question of the quote-unquote rigged election 60 times and lost. And Trump's answer to that is, no, I haven't. No, I didn't. I mean, it's one of those numbers everybody knows off the top of their head. almost as well as now, what do we know, 11,870 votes that he needed to find in Georgia. 60, it's actually 61, I think, 60 plus times going to court and losing every time. No, I didn't. It's about as insane as saying, well, okay, we're joined here by former President Donald Trump. No, you're not. Well, you are Donald Trump, aren't you? No. I don't know why you say I am. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. You biased mass media people. Well, your name is Donald Trump, isn't it? No, that's not. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't know who he is. Never met him. Never met the guy. Maybe he is a coffee boy or something like that. It's about that insane. But he does it every time on every case and then says, I want to take a mental acuity test, et cetera, and I should be the nominee. Okay, so also happening in court, just to bring you up to speed on these things, this time covered by the New York Times, as I mentioned before the break, special counsel seeking gag order on Trump in an election case, which is kind of amazing all by itself because sometimes I feel like the prosecution is getting free gifts every time he opens his mouth. Why do they want to gag him and about what? Prosecutors have asked Judge Tanya Chutkin to curb statements from the former president that could intimidate witnesses, influence potential jurors, or lead to harassment of others in the case. So now as I read that, why is it that I thought that was such a separate thing? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Well, it's about the same outcome that they're worried about. And now I'm not certain that they're just being covered from a different angle. They are currently seeking a gag order. And I guess in support of their motion for a gag order, they introduced evidence that come from now unsealed filings having to do with the April subpoena or the April adjudication, I guess, of the issues surrounding the subpoena to Twitter. I guess that's why it's the same issue, but approached from two different angles. One, the New York Times, is the story of the gag order that they're seeking. And the other, which I read first, is the Politico coverage of the arguments and evidence in support of the gag order, which rely on proceedings that had previously been sealed in dealing with a subpoena to Twitter. We want a gag order on him now because he is a serial witness intimidator and a fomenter of political violence. By way of evidence for those charges, I bring you what he did with the Mar-a-Lago subpoena and then attempted to do again with the Twitter subpoena, or rather what Twitter attempted to do on his behalf. So maybe it is a separate issue. If the target in that motion is all about Twitter. Let's read the New York Times article and decide. Alan Feuer writing this piece. Prosecutors have asked Judge Tanya Chutkin to curb statements from the former president that could intimidate witnesses, influence potential jurors, and lead to harassment of others in the case. Prosecutors have asked the judge overseeing the federal indictment on charges of conspiring to overturn the election to impose a narrowly tailored gag order on him, citing his near-daily social media attacks on people involved in the case. According to court papers released on Friday, the request to Judge Chutkin, who herself has been the subject of some of Trump's verbal assaults, brought to a head the simmering issue of the former president's online statements. In the 19-page motion, prosecutors said that some of the people Trump had gone after on social media, including Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, of course, special counsel, who had filed 2 indictments against him, have experienced subsequent threats from others. Trump's statements, they said, could affect witnesses in a potential jury pool for the trial as well, which is scheduled to take place in Washington starting in March. Since the indictment in this case, the defendant has spread disparaging and inflammatory public posts on Truth Social on a near-daily basis regarding the citizens of the District of Columbia, the court, prosecutors, and prospective witnesses. Like his previous public disinformation campaign regarding the 2020 presidential election, the defendant's recent extrajudicial statements are intended to undermine public confidence in an institution, here the judicial system, and to undermine confidence in and intimidate individuals, the court, the jury pool, witnesses, and prosecutors. The gag order sought by the government would prevent Trump from making any statements about the identity or testimony of witnesses in the case, or any remarks about anyone involved in the proceeding that could be considered disparaging and inflammatory or intimidating. The government seeks a narrow, well-defined restriction that is targeted at extrajudicial statements that present a serious and substantial danger of materially prejudicing this case, prosecutors wrote. Regardless of the outcome of the request, the legal battle over a gag order on the famously outspoken Trump will no doubt lead to scorched earth arguments about his First Amendment rights, a defense his lawyers have already sought to raise. The fight will be all the more intense given Trump's status as a frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination and his intention to make the prosecutions a central issue in his campaign. In other words, he says the gag order violates his First Amendment rights, which is always a correct assumption, but it's not that the First Amendment, the question is, where do the First Amendment rights end? Are there any limitations on it? And are there special circumstances that would dictate that in a situation like this, you'd say, well, you don't have a First Amendment right to conduct a witness intimidation campaign, for instance, and that's what we think you're doing. Whereas he'll say, all I'm doing is campaigning for president, which, it's a bit of a pickle, but he's certainly made he's laid down an extensive case in favor of limiting his rights, I guess you would have to say. John F. Lauro, a lawyer representing Trump in the election interference case, declined to comment on the government's request. That's interesting. A spokesperson for Trump said that the Justice Department was corruptly and cynically continuing to attempt to deprive President Trump of his First Amendment rights. Which one is it? It matters now that they are profiling these dapper Nazis who work for him or used to work for him these days. I don't know if what's his name, Ziegler? Anyway, within hours of the government's request for a gag order, Trump attacked Smith. What do you know? Both on social media and in a speech as deranged as he has done several times before. They leak, lie, and sue, and they won't allow me to speak, Mr. Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social. And to raucous applause at a dinner Friday night in Washington for the conservative group Concerned Women for America. They're not concerned for America. They say they're for America, but that's not why they're concerned, apparently. He added, these people are sick. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you, or something like that. Almost from the moment he entered public life, Trump has reflexively attacked his enemies in vivid and often vicious fashion, making use of social media in particular. But now that he is a defendant facing 4 indictments in 4 different cities, his habit of threatening and bullying those in his way has bumped up against the traditional strictures of the criminal justice system. A new player in his ecosystem, he would have you believe, I guess, except he's been a criminal defendant before. The request by prosecutors for a gag order was initially made in a sealed filing to protect the identities of the people who had been threatened. Smith's team filed a public version of their request on Friday with limited redactions. It is a separate motion, as it turns out, it looks like to me. The issue of Trump's threatening statements began almost immediately after he was indicted last month on 3 overlapping conspiracies to defraud the United States, to disrupt the certification of his loss to Joe Biden, and to deprive people of the right to have their votes counted. Those are the counts that Smith brought in his narrow indictment. One day after he was arraigned, Trump posted a message on his social media platform, Truth Social, saying, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. Mr. Trump's campaign quickly said the statements referred to the former president's political adversaries, or adversaries, as they say here in the United States and pretty much everywhere else. I don't know why I keep doing that pronunciation of it. I'm watching too much foreign TV, and I'm not even certain that they actually pronounce it that way. But I'll blame it on foreign TV. Why not? Still, the government complained about the post, and 1 week later at a hearing in Washington, Judge Chutkan sent a shot across Trump's bow, telling his lawyers that she would not tolerate any remarks from the former president that might intimidate witnesses or prejudice potential jurors. I caution you and your client to take special care in your public statements in this case. Oh well. I will take whatever measures are necessary to protect the integrity of these proceedings. Well, we'll get a chance, I think, to see what they are, because within days, Trump tested that warning by posting a string of messages on Truth Social that largely amplified others criticizing Judge Chutkan. In their filing on Friday, prosecutors went through a long litany of Trump's social media attacks, noting how he has referred to Smith several times as deranged and to the prosecutors working under him as a team of thugs. They pointed out that Mr. Trump has called Judge Chutkan a radical Obama hack and a biased Trump-hating judge. Prosecutors also said that Trump has attacked the residents of Washington at large, who one day will be called upon to serve as the jury pool for his trial. In one post, Trump claimed that he would never get a fair hearing from those who lived in the filthy and crime-ridden district, which, he said, is over 95% anti-Trump. But that's because 95% of the crime taking place in Washington during the period of interest was, in fact, part of Trump's conspiracies against American democracy. The filthy and crime-ridden. It was crime-ridden at the time. They were committing crimes left and right, and we caught you. The filing described how Trump had attacked the prosecutor in another case that Smith is handling, one in which the former president stands accused of illegally holding on to dozens of classified documents. You know the one we're talking about, Pervalago case. In late August, Trump apparently referred to an article in the New York Post, attacked the prosecutor, referring to an article in the Post, attacked the prosecutor in a documents case, J.I. Bratt, for having met at the White House with officials of the Biden administration. Look out. But prosecutors said that as Mr. Trump knew from the discovery evidence he had received in the case, Bratt went to the White House as part of the investigation of the classified documents case to interview a career military official who worked there, not to meet with or brief the president's staff. Seeking to connect Trump's out-of-court statements to directly to the charges they have brought, prosecutors cited several social media attacks that reached back to the chaotic post-election period when Trump was spreading lies that widespread fraud had marred the vote count. The prosecutors accused Trump of knowing that his menacing remarks at the time often inspired others to perpetrate threats and harassment against his target. And they cited as an example Chris Krebs, the former head of the government's cybersecurity agency, whom Trump had fired and then attacked on Twitter after Krebs vouched for the integrity of the 2020 elections. Not long after those attacks, prosecutors noted one of Trump's lawyers went on Newsmax and declared that Krebs should be drawn and quartered and taken out at dawn and shot. I don't understand why we can't do the same thing. That's an interesting thing. One of the weird overlaps between usual practice of law and what you're dealing with in the Trump situation. They apparently argue effectively enough, nobody's in jail for doing this. Their lawyers should be able to go on and say that the witnesses or potential witnesses against Trump should be murdered. They just say outright, and then they name the methodologies that ought to be employed in their murders. But of course, anybody who goes out and says that, I don't know, maybe Trump too should face capital punishment, but under due process of law, etc. Well, that's outrageous, and how dare you, and they will refer you to the Secret Service or something like that. And it's an interesting imbalance, right? The Trump side in the case can go out and call for the extrajudicial murder of witnesses against him. Of course, you're not allowed to call for the extrajudicial murder of a former president. That will get the Secret Service on your back, right? And presumably rightly so. But it's an interesting imbalance that there's a side in this case that says it's their right to call for the murder of the other side, but will remind you that in the interest of law and order, it's against the law to call for the murder of their side. Now, ordinarily, you don't want to let anybody call for the murder of your side at all, and I can understand the sentiment, but it is interesting that you would use the law to cover for that. It's against the law for you to call for my murder, but it's against the law for you to enforce any restrictions on my First Amendment rights to call for your murder. It's just an interesting right that he affords himself. I don't think it, on balance, is the way we ought to let things sit. Anyway, as they said, they were making these threats. The government's filing also mentioned Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, of course, two Georgia election workers whom Trump and his allies falsely accused of having mishandled ballots while counting votes in Atlanta during the 2020 election. Again, another great illustration of the complementary nature of these two indictments, in case you still have any doubts about it. Jack Smith's indictment does not mention this, I don't believe, although it makes the overall accusation something left out of Fani Willis's indictment because of the nature of it. It's rightly so. The federal indictment makes mention of the violation of federal law seeking that Trump perpetrated, seeking to deprive many in Georgia of their right to vote. But it is Fani Willis's indictment that specifically speaks of the targeting of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. But it's to Jack Smith's advantage here. Here, it's interesting. In his motion practice, he's citing these things which are called out in the state indictment. So again, good complementary work there. After Trump spread false accusations against Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss, who are mother and daughter, they were inundated by pernicious threats and intimidation, prosecutors said. And that brings us to the end of the article, which is a good thing, too, because it also brings us to the end of our time for today. Okay, so lots of good motion practice happening here, by which I mean, when I say good, I mean humorous, I guess, motion practice. Trump pretty much performing as expected and making the worst possible motions in terms of, a normal observer would look at these things and say, he's absolutely out of his mind. He's got no business doing anything like this, and these things will go nowhere. Not that they won't appeal them in every way possible. Okay, so that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more, and probably another reminder of the pending government shutdown situation. We'll probably delve a little further into what it is Dusty Johnson thinks he's up to and who's behind it, and whether or not Kevin McCarthy really has nothing to do with it when Joan McCarter visits with us for an update on those subjects and more. And for now, though, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but it's still Monday, and so we won't be doing the Tuesday show just yet. Here's what he's got on tap for Monday. Trump is blasted for floating a pardon for the Proud Boys, but, that's how he's going to campaign. I'm still not sure he's going to do those for free, but that's why he's floating it. He wants to be able to profit from it. Elsewhere, a black Alabama high school band director was, tased and then arrested after Birmingham police ordered him to end the performance. I wonder what the hell that's about. That's intriguing. Stay tuned to hear more about that when Justice takes over next.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
This is another interesting story. An Oregon judge will decide whether the gun control law approved by voters last November violates the state's constitution. Another flouting of the voters' will, I guess. And the Mississippi River is running so low, barge companies are limiting their loads just as farmers want to move crops downriver. Yikes. More climate change effects in the offing.